Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the And Both podcast. My guest is Jac White. She is the founder of Honeybees Group, a sales strategist, community builder, and mom to a, as she describes, very spirited 6-year-old. After a career leading sales and business development at high growth startups and running her own VC-backed company, she now helps women step into entrepreneurship on their own terms. Jac has a really awesome way of just getting straight to it, very practical, no fluff, which is so refreshing in this space of like, there's issues around everything. So one of the things that we talk about in this episode that I think everyone should know, whether or not you're an entrepreneur or whatever path you take career-wise, is talking about your enough number. And, whether or not you pursue entrepreneurship, she talks about, the act of doing both at the same time, raising a child and building a business. So without further ado, here's Jac. Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is modern motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hello and welcome to another episode of the And Both podcast. My guest today is Jac White. Jac, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn. We had a little preemptive discussion and I'm excited to learn more. But before we get started, let people know what you want them to know about you.
Yeah. So
Please.
I am a mom of a precocious 6.5-year-old boy. I am the founder of Honeybees Group, which is a membership community for women service providers and small business owners, where we teach them how to sell and build sales funnels in their business. And I call myself the make 7 figures in your sleep by posting on social media sales coach. Yes. So I've been doing it for about a year. I've had Honeybees Group, my consulting practice, for almost 7 years. So this is like, I'm rebuilding my business now as I'm entering a new stage of life and just really responding to my friends who have left the corporate world to start their own businesses. It's been a lot of fun.
And I think that every time I open up the news, it's another like, this is a wave of changes and regulations and orders that when you lay that on top of something else, you're like, oh, it really feels like there's one sort of target demographic that we're going for.
Yeah. I mean, nobody is coming to save us. So we need to, build our own businesses, build our own income streams, build our own economy, and, take control of our own businesses and livelihoods.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, and I think that resonates, or that carries across so many things, right? It's like no one's coming to save you at 3:00 in the morning when your kid is screaming and you're like, I might die because I am so tired. And you're just like, when you are the back line, you get to that point where like, okay, well, again, all of the people who are giving me advice at 2:00 in the afternoon while we're having coffee are not the people who are standing next to me at 3:00 in the morning. So like, how much of that advice am I taking? And how much of that direction is that going to help?
We're the front line and the back line.
Oh, it's, so true. I feel like that's a t-shirt all on its own.
Yeah.
So how did you get started with Honeybees Group and how did that all come to life?
Yeah. So I have always been in sales and business development. I started out in corporate companies, and then I spent about 12 or 15 years working for VC-backed startups in New York. I ran my own VC-backed startup. I call myself a recovering CEO of a VC-backed startup. And I always use consulting as my in-between startup gig. it took us a really long time to get pregnant with our son. And so we weren't really sure if that was ever going to happen for us. So when I did get pregnant, I was in a consulting stage of my career and realized, you know what? I want to just take some time and be a mom, and I may never get to do this again. And I want to just be able to spend as much time with him as I want for the first year, which is like such a gift. And I realize not something that everyone has the opportunity to do. So I was consulting on the side while I was being a full-time mom at home. And as I was thinking of going back into my next full-time role, the pandemic hit. So any role that I was discussing with the company immediately went away. But my consulting practice, like people wanted to hire me as a fractional or a consultant or as an advisor. So about 2 years into the pandemic, I realized that I thought I had found my next full-time role, which was owning my own consulting business and working with female-founded, VC-backed early stage companies. And I would go in and really build their sales and business development teams from the ground up. And I love working with small teams, early stage companies. It's messy. There's tons of opportunity. And I just think you can really make a big impact there. About a year ago, something happened where my friend group, a lot of us had left corporate during the pandemic, whether by choice, necessity, or not by choice, whatever, we were laid off.
Mm-hmm.
And we were starting our own companies. Since the pandemic, the past 2 years, there have been so many corporate layoffs. There's a whole level of management that has disappeared from companies and is not coming back. And I saw a bunch of my friends and peers struggling to replace their corporate incomes. And they were excellent at what they did. They were at the top of their game, but they had never had to sell or price or position themselves in this new way because they always worked for another company. And I saw that and I was like, oh, and I was sort of like, oh, well, think about this and let's do this. And here's, what you can do. And some of them were buying programs or hiring people to help them figure this out. And it was like, not, it's like, oh, well, tell me what you learned. And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to like post these reels on Instagram. And I'm like, girl, you're an IP lawyer. Like, that is not how you're going to get new clients. Like, that's not it. And so I just realized there was this moment where I was like, okay, I can do this. I've been running my own consulting business. I have this background. I was kind of like burning out on my old business, not burning out, but it wasn't like very fulfilling. And I'm like, okay, I have an opportunity to actually take my skills and do something that makes an impact for people that I can help. That like we know women are the economic engine and like the glue that holds our families together. And so I pivoted Honeybee's Group and launched as a membership community where we are learning how to sell, building sales systems, and finding support from other people who are building their businesses together. And, it's fun and it's awesome. And it's great to like see people having that success and building that confidence because nobody views themselves as a salesperson. But if you are responsible for bringing money into your company, if you are a consultant or a coach, like you are a salesperson, whether you think of yourself in that way or not, if you're responsible for bringing money in, you're a salesperson. And so you need to learn how to sell.
Yeah. And you've got to learn how to do it in a way that is real because I feel like our antennas are so tuned into this feels like this step by step where I'm supposed to follow down the pathway. And I think that the more you learn about it, the more you can flag that down and be like, oh, maybe you don't necessarily have something to sell.
Yeah, I think people have just been burned or like they're hip to the game on like what's real and what's not real. And I really focus on relationship-driven sales. So I think you need to get on sales calls. I think you need to talk to people like they're a real human being because they are. You need to be clear about who you work with and not be afraid to say no. mean, all of that, I think, is important to not only know how to sell, but to feel good doing it. Because I think
Mhm.
we see and we've had all of these bad sales examples that we're like, we have this aversion to selling because we don't think it feels good and we don't know how to do it in a way that actually works and makes both parties, come out with a positive experience.
Yeah. And so how is it going? How is the membership doing?
Good. I launched in February with a beta group. So we're filming this in May. So it takes 90 days to build a sales pipeline. So it's great to see this like working. And I'm sort of reworking the program now to figure out, I'm learning and testing too. This is like that's why it's a beta. And
Mhm.
so I'm retooling everything now to be like, okay, how do I take what worked? How do I tweak things? How do I build something that scales, but lets people still have like the same impact and experience and builds community? One of the things that has kind of surprised me in a good way is I knew people would get value from the content and the curriculum and me helping them do this. What I didn't realize is how much value people would get from connecting with other women, small business owners who got their challenges. And so that has been a really wonderful surprise. And it's making me think about how I continue to build out the membership in the business where we're letting people sort of connect and give peer reviews and peer feedback because that is really important. And I think, we're craving real connection and deep connection with people who get us and who get like where we are. And not everyone is a small business owner. So even I talk to some of my friends about the challenges and sort of the weight of what it is I'm building, and they don't get it. And so it's nice to kind of be with people who are like, oh, yeah, you had this thing and then, something went sideways and now you're fixing it. The community aspect has been an unexpected benefit.
Yeah, I love that because that's the thing, right? Is you want to be seen for who you are and what you're doing. And it's not always the fault of the person that you're trying to talk to where, they just don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult for that empathetic listening and just sort of have some way to bounce ideas off of, like, especially if I feel like this happens when you get into a conversation with a solver or a solutions person.
Yes.
Those are the hardest conversations to have because sometimes you don't even get all the way through the sentence and they're like, you know what you should do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Taking a left.
Or it's just, having someone who has been through that. Maybe they're 2 steps ahead of you. And so they're like, oh, when I had a client cancel, or when whatever, here's what I did and here's how it worked. So it's not even, somebody, it's just someone who has a shared experience. And I think, you have your different groups or communities or friend circles that support you in different ways. And so now people are building their support circle for their small growing business, which is great.
Yeah. I do love that the conversation around community is coming up a lot these days. I think that it, it this experience of online community and growing and things like that is something that came out of the pandemic. It's too
Yeah.
bad because it's something that I think a lot of us didn't realize we could use and needed until really
Now. Yeah.
until now. But also like during the pandemic, like how many people spent how many months feeling completely isolated or being completely isolated because
Yeah.
you don't know who or how to connect with people. So
Yeah.
I don't ever hope that there's another pandemic. I just hope that this is a lesson and a teaching from it that carries on forward because it is so hard to connect, especially like as a mom. It's so hard
Yeah.
to, people are like, oh, well, just go and grab coffee with someone. And you think, do you know the 82 steps that I have to take in order
Yeah.
to get to coffee? And am I even going to be able to get a chance to meet with this person? And that's why you've got to find the niches where that's a space where you can get what you need in an asynchronous way or in a way that that really works with your schedule.
Yeah. And I think the in-person part is really important. I also think people are craving in person. I've gone to a couple conferences in the last 6 months, and I used to go a lot before the pandemic to conferences. And I mean, I would fly all over for a client meet. I mean, it's like, I think the other good thing that came out of the pandemic is my friends and I were talking. We're like, remember, I live in New York City. Remember we would fly to San Francisco for a meeting for the day? Like, what were we thinking? Were we crazy? So I think we
Mm-hmm.
realized like when it's important to be in person, what we can do remotely, that in-person piece is really important. You mentioned it as like, it's really hard for me to find time to meet one person for coffee. What I've been doing that's been really awesome is getting like a few people together for breakfast or coffee, like a few, like 5 to 7. And we're just like, hey, we're just going to like walk in the park. We're just going to get coffee at this coffee shop. And what it allows us to do is like get that connection, meet some new people, but it's a small enough group that you can get that catch up. Because if I just don't have the time to meet for individual coffees with all of the people that I want to catch up with, it's not
Yeah.
possible. But if you
Yeah.
can do it in smaller groups, somebody is always meeting somebody new. You know, it's kind of like another way of building community, but on a micro scale. And that's been really fun. I've been doing that for the past couple of months. And it's actually something I'm going to make a point to try to do once a month.
Mm-hmm. And so your son was
Yes.
born around the time that you were starting a consulting practice, right? That's
Yes.
how the math
Yes.
works.
Yep.
And how did that all happen? Were you like, oh, I think I'm gonna wind this down with impending baby, or am I gonna I need to make a shift and I want to do that? What led to that?
Yeah. So I had wound down the company that I was running. So I was interviewing with a company that wanted to hire me full time. And I said, listen, I sort of broke the HR rules and I was like, listen, because I knew I didn't want to be full time after he was born. And I knew how precious when you're a startup, like those bodies are. And I just was sort of like, listen, I want to be upfront with you. I'm pregnant. I'm not interested in a full time role, but I will, I have 5 months left of this pregnancy. I will work with you on a fractional, like almost full time basis, and then give me a little time. And then I'll come back on a fractional basis if you want. Or I can do a lot of the legwork. Like, let's get started on things right now while you look for that full time role. And that's what we did, which is not traditional. I don't know that I would give anybody like the advice to approach it like that, but that's what I ended up doing. And then I took a nice long maternity where I didn't have any clients and then started working part-time to build up to a full-time role. And then I was interviewing for a couple really interesting full-time roles when we went into lockdown, which, us, like everybody else, we thought would be, a couple weeks, maybe a month, it just kept dry. And then we quickly realized it was going to be something longer. And those full-time roles went away. They weren't full-time roles, but they did offer like, hey, we still need this help, but it's not a full-time role. Would you come on as a consultant or as a fractional? And so I said yes, because I wanted to work. At that time, childcare was really weird. So I was kind of happy not to have a full-time role, but still have some income coming in. And so I consulted for a few companies in the early stages of the pandemic and then realized I actually really loved consulting. I liked being able to, as a fractional, get deep with a company, but on a pretty limited scope that I could control. So I sort of like could leave all of the like BS of working within a company to the side and just focus on like what I was there to do. And I could help set the scope. I could do it like on a timeline that worked for me. And I liked being able to get into a few different companies at a time as opposed to being deep inside one brand. Not to say that in 10 years, I might not want to go back into a brand. But at that time, I really loved being able to work on different projects with different companies. And so that's what I did for 5 years. I was a fractional or an advisor to different VC-backed startups all over the country, actually. And some relationships were 3 years. 3 years was my longest contract. And I sort of did a bunch of different things within that business, helped them identify new lines of revenue, helped them shut some businesses down that weren't really doing well. And then in other cases, I would work really specifically on like a 3 to 6 month project. So the type of work and the type of scope varied, but I loved that kind of work. And if you can build a fractional, retainer-based consulting practice and you can, charge fair wages for what you're doing, that's a great business to have.
Mhm.
And I love helping people like build those businesses and build it to profitability.
Yeah. Well, and two, I mean, get paid for what you know, right? I think that's the
Mhm.
hardest. That is something that if you are someone who struggles, you have all this expertise and you have someone who struggles to say, "Oh, but I actually know this." It's that we
Yeah.
hide behind that piece of like, "Well, I don't want to not necessarily I don't want to make a wave, but I'm not really sure if I'm the one." And it's separating your expertise from that
Yeah.
feeling of like personal to say, "Okay, here are all the qualifications that I have and I belong in this scene if you're interested in
Yeah.
that."
Yeah. That's exactly right. And I think so many of us have like what I call fraudy feelings
Mhm.
in the work that we do. So it might be not charging for what we're worth. Like, ta- like you've been doing this for 15 years, 10 years, like the amount of knowledge and expertise that you have doing what you do. You probably went to school. Maybe you did postgraduate work. You have degrees and certifications. You've been an intern. You've managed teams. Like the amount of expertise that you have, and then you're afraid to ask for a fair price because you don't think people will say yes to it, right? Or
Mm.
you think like, oh, I've never worked at a company quite like that. Maybe my, expertise doesn't transfer. So there's a lot of mindset work that goes into it. And there's so much deprogramming around selling and asking for what you're worth. I mean, I do a whole 90-minute workshop on sales myths. And it's sort of, I always start with, what are the messages that we've been told about money? It's like, don't talk about money. It's not polite. Don't be bossy. Don't, all of these messages that we have been given since we were young, you sort of are still live within you. And so you have to kind of like address that. And I'm not a mindset coach. I'm not woo. Like I live very much in like spreadsheets and the tactical, but I'd be, silly not to think that that plays into it for everybody, myself included.
And so when people come to you and you see their CV or their level of experience and they're like, where do I even start? Like,
Yeah.
how does that look when people engage in that? And whether or not, do they come into the community first or do you find people fractionally and then say, you know what, how about we start here?
It can work both. It can work both ways. But one of the first, and it depends on what stage you're at, but one of the first things I have people do is come up with what I call your enough number. So all business owners have a revenue number in mind, right? I want to make 6 figures, 250, 500, a million, whatever that number is. But most people don't know how much money they need to make to
Mhm.
live their life and to fuel all of the things that they want to do. So the first thing I have people do is figure out their enough number. And I worked for a personal finance technology company where we worked with women and taught them about money. So this kind of comes out of that experience where it's a mini course that I either walk through with you or you do it on your own. And you go through all of your expenses, right? Your personal budget, the things you have to have, like housing and food and transportation and childcare, all of the things you want to do, like a vacation and, your gym membership. I'm not like a don't go to Starbucks to like save $5 a day kind of person. Then it's like, what are your savings goals? You need to save for your retirement, especially as a small business owner, right? You don't have a pension or a matching 401k. You're responsible for fueling your retirement. Maybe you want to try to save for your college, right? So your children's college, whatever it is, we go through your personal budget and then we take into account your business taxes, which I think can be really surprising to people how much money you have to pay in business taxes. We underestimate it, especially when you have those jumps where maybe you're going from like $75,000 to $150,000 or $150,000 to $200,000, right? Your tax bracket changes. And then we have your profit margin in your business. What kind of expenses do you have? And after we do all of that, we get to your enough number. And that is the amount of money you need to make in your business. And that is incredibly eye-opening to people when they see that number for the first time, because it's often a lot higher than they think it is. And so they set a revenue goal thinking like, oh, I'm going to hit this revenue goal and I'm going to have so much money to save or be able to do all of this stuff. And then they realize that actually that's the bare minimum they need to make just to fuel their life. And so that's the first thing I always have people to do, because once we get that enough number, we can start building your business to at least get to that number. Ideally, we want to exceed it, but it's like, okay, now how do you package what it is you know, and how do you price it to make sure you're hitting that number? How many clients do you need to bring on in order to sell, to hit that number? And then once you know how many clients you need, well, how many leads do you need in order to get that number of clients? And so I really work backwards. A lot of people start with the end gate, like the beginning of like, oh, I'm going to just price it this way. And like, I really start with the end game. How much money do you need to put in your pocket at the end of the week and then the end of the month and at the end of the year? And then let's build your business to get to that number and exceed that number. And I think that methodology and that framework really resonates with people. It's the way I've built my own business. And it's kind of like, you need to know what the goal is. And it's not an arbitrary goal, it's an actual goal. So now you're motivated to hit that goal, because if you don't do it, then, you don't get to save as much, or maybe you don't get to take a nice vacation, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And it's so important to know what that number really is, because especially if you have a lot of thoughts and feelings around money, which I think everybody does.
Yeah.
It's that there's the value part of it in terms of value of self, right? Like I know all of these things, but I don't think anyone's going to pay me to do that. However, cold hard facts, I need to make this amount of money. So it gives a little bit of a rip the Band-Aid off kind of momentum for people to say, okay, well, if I want to keep doing the things that I want to do, if I want to have these goals, here's where I have to get super uncomfortable in order to move forward.
Uncomfortable is my word of the year, by the way, because I just think like what I'm doing something new that's uncomfortable. What I'm asking the women in my community to do is uncomfortable. And I think, moving through the uncomfortable part and doing that hard work is where you see sweet success at the end of it. And I think money is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but the power is in knowing how much money you need to make. Because then you have a goal, right? Like you said, you know what you're working towards. And sometimes you're negotiating with yourself like, hey, maybe I'm not going to be able to save as much for my child's college this year because I'm building my business. And like, that's the thing that has to give. Or maybe we're not going to be able to take as nice of a vacation this year because I have to build up to it. I think all of that is healthy. But if you're taking a vacation in the beginning of the year and you're like blowing that part of your budget and you don't have a path to like making that up, I'd rather know that in the beginning and make decision, negotiate with yourself than find out at the end of the year that, you're falling short on the revenue piece. So that's the first thing I like to do is map out the money, because then you can like set some clear goals, know how to package and price and how many of each you need to sell. That's always step number one.
Yeah. And also, too, you don't want the end of the year when you realize you fall short. It's not necessarily like when you're buying groceries. That's like when your IRS bill comes due.
Yes.
That nothing gets the sweat glands moving like a notification with the stamp on the side.
Yes.
But, or
please respond within 15 days.
Yeah. Or a really uncomfortable conversation with your accountant to say, oh, wait a minute.
Yep.
Yeah, oh my gosh. My husband and I are both self-employed, and I remember the first time that we learned that he had a jump in income, like then the business really started to take off. And it was that conversation with our accountant who was like, oh, you didn't make estimated tax payments. And we were so young that we were like, I'm sorry, what is that? And he was like, oh, you did not make estimated tax payments because you didn't know you needed to make estimated tax payments. Here is your tax bill. And it was like, ugh.
Yeah, it happens. And especially during those jumps. And look, it's happened to me. It will happen to everyone. It's why you need to have some like cushion in your business and some savings for like anything unexpected like that. But it's why also, one, I think people should have a good accountant. Some of the best money you can spend, especially if that's not an area of expertise for yourself. And why, when you're planning your business, you need to account for taxes in your business, because it is a rude awakening for people, who never saw it. It just came out of their paycheck. They never had to think about it. You're a W-2 employee. You don't have to think about it. When you're a business owner, it's your responsibility. Nobody's taking it out of your monthly retainers or your hourly fees, which, by the way, I don't think anybody should be charging hourly. We can get into that, but.
And I think too, that whole idea about setting yourself up, right? So you figure out what the number is, and then, I don't know what your step 2 is, but to me, what makes sense, step 2 is now you got to put the people in place so that as you build out this business, you're doing it the right way. And one of them, like I will say, I think people also think that stuff like hiring an accountant is like a $10,000 thing. Like it's not. And the money that you save in being able to, I mean, might be a little bit of the financial bat phone, to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of. And then to have that person on the other end of the line say, okay, well, this year it makes sense for you to do this. This year, like for him, I know it's when equipment gets traded out, when it's like, how does this make sense to do this? And what is the timing for that? It's not something we can figure out on our own. Yeah. And it's such a value add. A good accountant far and away pays whatever they're paying, you're paying them tenfold.
And also, as a business owner, there are a ton of tax deductions. Like there's a ton of like benefits from a tax perspective and a saving perspective that you get to take advantage of that your accountant can help you figure out. So I work from home. I can take a certain percentage of my mortgage as a tax deduction. I can have different investment accounts as a small business owner. And my accountant is the one that sort of mapped all of that out for us. So yes, you have to pay and be aware of how much money you have to pay in taxes, but there are a ton of advantages tax-wise of being a small business owner that, your accountant is always staying up to date on all of that stuff that, you might not know. I certainly didn't know. And so, yeah, I agree. It's the best money, some of the best money you can spend as a business owner. And it's not expensive.
No, and I think that's the other part, is that idea of, having the myth busting approach to like, it feels like having your own business. Now I also have my own business, and it feels like having your own business is like that's like a them thing. That's not a me thing, but it's really not. It's such an achievable and attainable thing. And that's not to say that every business has to be, the 7-figure, 12 minutes a day on Instagram.
No. I don't even know that those businesses that say they're that are actually that. I mean, I just think there's so much smoke and mirrors. Most small businesses are not that. Most service-based businesses are not that. The other super important thing that I think people underestimate is trademarks
Mm-hmm.
and copyrights. So, a lot of times you think, oh, that's for big companies, big corporations. Getting your name, your company name, protected is, I think, incredibly important. There's nothing worse than being 2 or 3 years into business and getting a cease and desist letter from someone who says, hey, you're infringing on my copyright. And it's not expensive to do. There are lawyers that specialize in it. Actually, Lauren from Storylock Legal is somebody that I love and recommend who does just that. She helps small business owners in an affordable way secure all of their marks. So anybody who has a website or an email newsletter or a podcast, all of that stuff should be locked up. It's not
Yeah.
expensive. It's pretty easy. And I have friends who have had to change everything because someone said, hey, this is my mark. And sometimes it's not such a big deal. You change everything, but sometimes it can be a real hassle if you're, been doing something for a while and you've built your own brand equity in whatever it is you do.
Yeah. And Lauren has been a guest on the show before.
Oh, she has? Oh, she's fantastic. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. And I think that's the idea. The ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if you don't necessarily have to do, it doesn't have to be a $50,000 startup cost to get all of these things lined up, but just making sure that you have a map and a pathway to do it in a way that is protecting yourself while also growing your business. So on the other end or the other side of it is your son is 6.5.
Yes.
How do you? I imagine that the fractional and the community base and things like that, like you're going in a lot of different directions on any given day based on, what you see in the community and where business is going and all of that stuff. So how does that layer into the mom side of life?
Yeah, it's hard. I wish I had it figured out. I don't. It's day to day and week by week. Some days, like, just we're rocking, right? We're on to school on time. I have great meetings. I get all the things done that I said I wanted to get done. We come home. We've had a good day at school. Everybody's happy. We sit down and we have dinner. Some days are great.
Mm-hmm.
And then other days, we're running late. I have a meeting cancel. Something takes longer than I think it's going to take. It's the same thing that we're all going through. It's day to day. And what I am trying to get better at is setting boundaries because I am not a boundary setter. I actually was talking to somebody as a guest on my podcast, and she said something about, oh, I help women set boundaries. And literally that word, I was like, what? Like, it wasn't even in my recall vocabulary because I just say yes. I say yes to the PTA. I say yes to my clients. I say yes to my friends. And so I end up overextending myself and sometimes failing at things because I'm trying to do too much. So that's one of the things I'm really trying to be better at is setting boundaries and hoping. My first goal is not to just jump and say yes, to pause every time somebody asks me to do something like, hey, Jac, can you? And I would just be like, okay, let me think about that. So I don't have to commit either way and just let myself sort of sit with it and be like, okay, do I have the space to do this right now? Everything is a trade-off. So if I say yes, what am I not going to be able to do or what am I not going to have time for so that I get to balance? There's, one of the things about owning your own business is, and sorry, I live in an apartment, so I don't know if you can hear the door slamming of my neighbors. I do own my own business. So one of the things I get to do is set my own schedule. So 2 days a week, I pick my son up from school And I have those afternoons free, and that's like our time to hang. We maybe go to the library and do something. On Friday afternoons, I pick him up from school. We get a special treat. That's like my protected time. And it allows me to, make sure I get to show up as the mom I want to be. And if I worked for a company, I wouldn't necessarily get that. So to me, that's a huge benefit of owning my own business and being my own boss, is I can say every Wednesday and Friday afternoon, that's my son and my time. The other thing is we've gotten a lot more protective over our weekends. Before I had my son, we were always out and about and meeting people. Now weekends are really family time, and we'll do things with friends, but we really like to just hang out together. And then one of the things that we have only started doing, my husband and I, is a weekly or a twice a month date night. So we have a standing babysitter, and I didn't do this for a long time. I felt so much guilt around doing this because I was just like, no, my son, it took us, I didn't want to be away from him during this. He's at school all day, right? Like I just felt guilty, like taking time for myself or taking time for my husband and I to reconnect. And I have to tell you that that's been one of the best things that I've done for myself and for my marriage in a long time, is us just getting dedicated time. We have a standing babysitter. We go to dinner. We mostly only talk about our son, but there's something about it just being the two of us and not dinner, which is like, crazy with a 6-year-old. It's just us, and we can kind of like sit down, chill out, be in a fun place. That's been amazing. So I don't have it all figured out. I feel like as my son grows up, he's in different stages. And so we're all adjusting to the stages that he's in and what he needs. But it's just doing the best you can and giving yourself grace when it doesn't work out the way you want it to, day by day and week by week.
Absolutely. And it's also that I hope that, in all of the episodes of the podcast that I do and all of the people that I talk with online and in communities and things like that, it's this idea that no one ever has it figured out.
No one has it figured out.
And it's such a disservice to moms, and especially moms, to feel like somebody else has it nailed down, because it's a very different roll of the dice. Like no two children are the same. No two family or, makeups are the same. No two anything is the same. And figuring out what works for you and what works in your family is the key. It's not that your family looks like everybody else's family.
Yep.
Like I know people that they spend a lot of time socially, like with other families. It's sort of like that. Everyone's kind of together and all that stuff. And I think about like during the pandemic when people were like, we got to make a pod because all of this. And I had people reach out to me and they were like, we're thinking about forming a pod. And I was like, okay, well, I also had a brand new baby. So that might have been a little bit of a lens that I had. But I was like, how many people is it in a pod? And they were like, ideally 4. And I was like, I have a pod.
Yes.
Like I have 4 kids. I have a pod.
Yeah.
And, but it's that, it's like, oh, these people are all getting together and it would be so fun and all that stuff. But like our pandemic experience was completely different. My kids were in the backyard and we went on these adventures and stuff like that. And I don't think anything is right.
Yeah.
It just has to be what works.
I love that. Is so true. And I love that reframe, because you have to find your own way and not apologize. That's the other thing, is I think people feel guilty when they hear where all of these people are doing a pod, and then you're like, well, I'm sorry, or it's like, no, if the pod's not for you, the pod's not for you. Like, you don't have to apologize. You don't have to feel guilty. You don't owe anybody an explanation. You're on your own path. You have to do what feels good and trust your instinct. And that's, as mothers, I think we have to trust our instincts for our children and our families. And that's something in some ways I'm really good at, and in some ways I'm trying to be better at, and say, this is what we're going to do. And thank you so much. Pod sounds cool. We're good here.
Mm-hmm. And knowing, like you said, knowing that things are going to change. So what works for you when you have a 2-year-old is very different than what works for you at a 4-year-old and what will work when he's 15.
Yeah. I talk about businesses a lot like I do children, where it's like sort of every 6 months, my child is different. And every so often, my business is different. So you have like your baby business, and then, you have a teenager business, and then you're trying to help your business figure out what it wants to be when it grows up. Right. And so it's like that can look like a pivot, that can look like a different product or service. It can look like a different revenue. And so how you run your business is different. But, I see a lot of parallels between raising children and growing businesses in terms of, they're constantly changing. You constantly have to evolve as a businessman, as a business owner, and that's okay. Embrace that. Don't fight it.
Yeah, exactly. I had a guest on earlier, I think she was season 5, talking about exactly this. We were talking about how CEO-ship and motherhood are the same thing, because you're talking about how the company looks, how the employees or the people inside the company are maturing and growing into their roles, and how they need to continue to be challenged. And when do you support, and when do you let them fall on their face, and when do you decide things aren't working and we have to reshuffle or reorganize everything? And it's so true. And I think that in all of that, the people that are the most profoundly overqualified to start businesses are moms.
Yeah.
No matter what it is you do, right? No matter what it is your expertise is, your area, all of that stuff, profoundly overqualified, yet run into that same, they say, like, if there's a job open and there's a man that's 60% qualified, they will apply. But a woman, if she's 120% qualified, won't apply.
Yeah.
It has to be like that. It's got to be. We got to start getting the people who are really, really suited for this role in that.
Yeah. And that's my whole mission, is helping women and helping moms build businesses that work for them. And, you said before, is like, this 7 figures might not be your goal. Great. It's not our responsibility to tell other people what their goals should be, but we can use our skill sets to help them achieve that goal, whatever it is.
Yeah. And you have, having the points, the sort of the contact points that are firmly rooted in reality. Like, how much money do you need to make?
Yeah.
How much time can you put into this? What are your
skill sets?
What's your skill set, and what are the barriers that we are not able to overcome?
Right.
Like, do you have a job that would be best geared towards, placement in New York City, but you live in Oklahoma?
Right.
Like, how do we
reconcile that? Because that's a big gap.
Yeah.
Actually,
that is an actual gap and an actual plane ride. But I love that, because you bring that in together. You bring in the piece of what's real, what's not real, and then how do we fill this in, and how do we make the sales component, which can feel insurmountable, not so insurmountable.
Yeah, that's right. And I talk about sales as a skill. And, we human beings are designed to learn new skills. We are learning new skills all of the time since the time we are born. And selling feels scary. It feels, gross. It feels like something we're never going to be able to do. And it's actually just a skill. And so I think we sometimes, whether it's in business or in motherhood, we work things up in our head to be scarier and more dramatic and than they actually are. And so it's like, no, actually, let's break this down and let's, tackle it and learn it and build it. And by the way, you're totally capable of this. Like, you're a mom. You've done things way harder than this. And so let's figure it out.
Yeah. Keeping human beings alive that are doing their very best at certain points in time to not
be alive.
Scissors, paint, all of it. I love it. I think that's a really beautiful overlap and carryover of skills and putting it forward in a way that helps lift other people up and make differences in other people's lives. So, thank you so much for coming on. And I would love for you to share where people can find you and how, if someone who's listening to this episode is like, wait a minute, it's just the sales piece that I have to do in this business. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I hang out on LinkedIn a lot. So come and find me on LinkedIn, Jac White. I also have a podcast called Girls Make Bank, where I talk a lot about selling and small business ownership. And then you can find me at honeybeesgroup.co if you are interested in either working one-on-one or joining our membership. And I appreciate what you are doing and helping to amplify people's experiences and stories. And I think we need more of this. The more we can sort of share our experience with other people, the better armed they are to kind of take some advice and implement it. So Thank you.
Well, it is my absolute pleasure because I get to meet people like you that come on and say wonderful things that completely make sense to me. And I think it helps a lot of other people in the world. So thank you again for joining me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.